Yes, well, I mean, this dam collapse heaps misery upon great devastation. I mean, we're already looking at a situation in which there were cholera outbreaks in the east and northeast of the country. We all know that this is a very grave situation in terms of famine risk because of extensive displacement and the impact of the war. So, I mean, this is the dam collapse is small compared to all of that, but it just gives you a sense of how acute the problems are. There are villages trapped and there's no access. There hasn't been access for months to many of the people. So it's very hard to even assess the scale of the damage of any of these kinds of catastrophes at the moment in Sudan because there's such limited ability to access and monitor the situation on the ground.
Well, Sudan is already dealing with multiple crises, as you've mentioned, after war erupted in April last year between the SAF and the RSF. What are the two sides campaigning for? They seem to have been fighting with no end in sight.
Yes, I mean, this looks like a battle to the end, in a sense. So the SAF is the Sudan Armed Army. The RSF is a paramilitary force that was constitutionally legitimated by the former President al-Bashir. Now, both of these actors are vying for control, military control of the state, so they can dictate the political terms of Sudan's future. You might recall, your listeners and viewers might recall, there was a popular revolution in 2019 that deposed President al-Bashir. It wasn't quite a revolution, it was also a palace coup. Both of these actors pushed Bashir out in a way to retain their ability to control the future of the country. They then orchestrated a coup in 2021, kicked out the civilian forces that had been pushing the non-violent revolution, but then they fell out amongst themselves. And really, there's not room in the country for both military forces. So both know that they must prevail militarily. They're campaigning for that political control, and there's no sign that they are looking for a political solution or a peace agreement or settlement out of this.
Well, the two warring sides are backed by outside support. What part have they had to play in the conflict?
Yeah, a very big part. So we're really talking about new regional rivalries. I mean, we're in a time in which geopolitical instability in this part of the world is very high. So in particular, Gulf actors, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, but also Egypt, all vying for sort of hegemonic power, regional hegemonic power in the Middle East. They all have a stake in this conflict. The UAE in particular has been called out for its support for the RSF, for the paramilitary RSF. And that is military support, but it's also linked to the political economy interests of the United Arab Emirates in the gold production that comes out of Sudan. There's a complex relationship between these armed forces in Sudan and also the war in Yemen, in which both the Saudis and the Emiratis backed and financed Sudanese forces as foot soldiers in the Yemen war.
Can you tell us, Professor, how has this war led to what has been described as the largest humanitarian crisis in the world right now? I mean, more than 23 million people, that's half of the country's population, are in urgent need of aid. How are they getting access to basic necessities?
Right. Well, I mean, the scale of this, as you said, the mind boggles at what we're talking about here. I mean, Sudan has seen its fair measure of a catastrophe and crisis over many decades. But what we're facing here is the worst hunger crisis seen in the country, and that includes the famous famines as such of the 1980s. As you said, half the country in what's classified by the recognized UN body as crisis, IPC level 3, which is a crisis situation. But 750,000 are facing catastrophe according to that classification scheme. That means famine onset is real. And 8 million are in an acute situation. What happens in these complex emergencies is it's not just a mere problem of access to food. The security and military situation makes it near impossible for people to access aid and supplies from outside, or for the outside actors to get in. Markets collapse, currencies collapse. So a lot of it is about the complex ways in which insecurity feeds off what is already a hunger crisis that's going on. So it is a very grave situation. It's been very difficult for aid actors to operate. Very few international actors have been able to maintain substantial operations. A lot has depended on local actors. And, the silver lining in this is the way in which there's a mobilization of Sudanese at a very local levels, mobilizing to support each other, but also getting some external support from the diaspora. But all of that is small compared to the scale of the crisis that people face.
Professor Sharath Srinivasan, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.